A very good afternoon, grade 12 learners. My name is Mr. Simbi, and welcome to today's accounting lesson. This lesson is brought to you by the Gauteng Department of Education in collaboration with Sabono Discovery Center. In today's lesson, I'm going to continue with the topics that we began last week. Last week, we began reconciliations, and I promised that I was going to look at creditors reconciliation, bank reconciliation, as well as debtors reconciliation, not forgetting the debtors age analysis. And in the previous week, we did bank reconciliation. We did a number of activities. We went on to the creditors reconciliation, and I promised that this week, I was going to look again at another activity, and then we move on to the debtors as well as the age analysis. Okay, so without further ado, let's go and look at my objectives for today. Here are my objectives. We're going to prepare the creditors reconciliation. We're going to do the debtors reconciliation, because remember last week we did one type of the creditors reconciliation where we had the creditors ledger and we also had the creditors statement. So today I'm going to do something a bit different. And then we're going to do the debtors reconciliation, and then we'll also look at the debtors age analysis, and obviously we'll also look at some internal control processes. So as alluded earlier on, in the previous week, I did my bank reconciliation. I did the BRS. We were able to update our CPJ and our CRJ, and then we're able to prepare the reconciliations. So we're able to update the CRJ and the CPJ, and we're able to prepare a bank account as well as preparing the bank reconciliation statement itself. This was in the previous week. And then we also did creditors reconciliations. So remember what I said, that with the creditors reconciliations, you have books that are created or prepared by the business, that is us. And what we prepare is the creditors ledger. The creditors ledger. So from the creditors ledger, we then compare it with, so we say versus, what is prepared outside. And last week we were calling them, and we called them our creditors. So then you compare it with the statement. So it was the ledger against the statement. And last week we did a number of activities of this type where we had errors and omissions, and we're comparing the ledger, what was done by us, against the statement that is prepared by our creditors. And in this week, I promised last week that I was going to do one where we now have our creditors ledger. At times you can find it's written as the list. So I'm going to compare the creditors list versus the creditors control. The creditors control. Now, the thing about this type of reconciliation is that the creditors ledger or the creditors list is prepared by us, and then the creditors control is also prepared by us. So now we're going to look at errors and omissions which were done by us in the preparation of the creditors list as well as the creditors control. And then in today's class, I'm also going to look at the debtors reconciliation and the debtors age analysis. All right, so it is very important, my good friends, that you tell your friends to tell their friends that Mr. Simbi is on, so that we can enjoy in today's lesson. It's very important. I know you have started studying. I know you are studying. And remember, time is no longer on our side, because I don't think next week Friday will be here, because Friday we are going to write. So that means if we're going to meet here, we're going to meet next week on Thursday, because Friday is a day for us to be writing our prelim paper 1 for accounting. So I'm looking forward to having you in my class next week, but let's look at the reconciliations in the meantime. So my first activity is from the NSC November for the year 2023, and here it is. So as usual, it is an every Friday song that you need to speak to your teacher, talk to your teacher, and ask them if they can give you the worksheet for the day. And I know this worksheet was shared early in the morning. So today, early in the morning, the worksheet was out already. So you should take the worksheet, print it out, if you have the means to do so, and then make sure that you sit with it and then you do the calculations together with me. You're allowed to ask questions. If your teacher is close to you, that even makes it better, and then we can have calculations going. You need to have the worksheet, calculator, very key. You need to have your calculator. You need to have a calculator. You need to have somewhere to write. If you don't have the worksheet with you, you need to have paper to write on, as well as obviously your pen. All right. But once again, welcome to today's accounting lesson. Now, the question reads as follows. The information relates to SEB traders for August 2023. Required. Taking into account the errors and omissions. So we are informed that there are errors and there are omissions that we need to take into account. We therefore need to calculate the correct balance for the creditor's control account and the creditors list. All right. Indicate the changes with a plus for an increase and a minus for a decrease. SEB traders intend settling the account of Puto wholesalers on 31 August. All right. So we are SEB traders and we buy from Puto wholesalers, and we would want to reconcile our books. All right. And then we are supposed to calculate the amount due to them. Okay. So let's go on to more information. Balances and totals on 31 August 2023 before correcting the errors and omissions. We have the creditors control account balance, which is 175,980. And the creditors list total in the creditors ledger is 186,350. The moment these amounts do not agree, then we have a problem. Should they agree? Definitely they should agree. Why should they agree? You have to understand where we come with this whole reconciliation process. Okay, so when we are dealing with creditors, you have to understand the source document and the signs in which we record these particular source documents. Are you ready? Let's begin. The moment we buy goods on credit from our creditors, the source document is your invoice. And the sign for the invoice will be a plus. So once we buy goods, therefore we know that it's an invoice and it will be a plus. And you know that when these goods are purchased, we record them in the CJ. And then when we pay for these goods, all right, remember, we would make an EFT. And that EFT, we record it as a minus. We are paying now to our creditors. So it's an EFT and the sign is a minus. And you have to know that that goes to the CPJ. You still following me? Okay, let's go on. If they give us discount, I'm going to come in and record it as discount. All right. The discount, the sign is a minus. The discount, the sign is a minus. And you'd know that your discount received. You'd also find it in your CPJ because that is where you find your discount. And then when we return the goods, all right, creditors allowances. So the source document is going to be your debit note. And the sign for a debit note is a minus, the debit note. The sign is a minus. And that would be recorded in the CAJ. Let's say they charge us interest. I'm just going to record interest here. Your interest, the sign will be a plus, and that interest will go to the GJ. Now, we're going to take these ones and we post them individually to the creditors list. And we take the totals from these ones and we post them also to the creditors control. So here we're dealing with individual accounts. These are individual accounts. But when we come here, we're dealing with totals. So these are your totals. The question then comes, should this balance in the creditors list, which is this one here, all right, should this balance in the creditors list, in the creditors ledger, be the same as the amount in the creditor's control? Yes, they should be same. They should be the same because, number one, both of these are created from the same set of information. They're created from the same set of information. So they should agree, in other words, because it is coming from the very same set of information. And then they should also agree. Why? Because the creditor's control, you see, it takes only totals. So that makes it a summary. The creditor's control is a summary of the creditor's list. The creditor's control is a summary of the creditor's list. These are only two reasons that I can give you off my head, but I know you have done this even in the previous year. Okay, so here I was just trying to let you know what we're going to be dealing with. So once we see invoice, we think plus, because it means we purchase goods, we owe more. Once we see EFT, it means we paid. Once we pay, we now owe less. Once we see discount, it means they have subtracted more than what we paid them, so we now owe less again. Once we see debit note, it means we returned goods, we owe less. Once we see interest, it means we now owe more, so your sign will be a plus. So signs are going to be very key in this particular question. Signs are going to be very key. Remember what they said here, that you need to indicate with a plus for an increase and a minus for a decrease. So when you come here, already it informs you what you must plus and what you must minus. It tells you already what you must add as well as subtract. Are we good? Okay, let's go see the information. Here's the information. Errors and omissions. So we have information number 1 up to 5. Okay, I need a thumbs up so then I can begin in today's activity. So what I've done is I've broken down these particular adjustments so that you can be able to do them one at a time with me. And I'll be slow. I'll make sure that you're following and I'll not be fast. Yes, I've received some of your messages. I say, Mr. Simbi, at times you're a bit faster. I wanted to say you need to catch up with me, but I then said, you know what? Let me slow it down. So today I'm going to be very, very slow so that you guys can catch up with me. Okay, cool. Let's go. Adjustment number 1. Adjustment number 1. Okay, error and omission. It reads, the total of the creditor's allowances journal. So, if I were to bring you here, you can see that in the creditor's control, that's where we hear the word total. So once you hear the word total, it is trying to tell you where the error is. Let's go back. The total of the creditor's allowances journal, the CAJ, if I see CAJ, in my mind, I think minus. Once I see CAJ, in my mind, I think minus, was understated by 3.6. In other words, it means we went and we subtracted an amount which was less. So for us to correct this, we need now to go, where do we go? Do we go to the control or to the list or both? That becomes the question. But the key was given. It is the total of the creditors, the total of the CAJ. Once it is a total of a journal, it means it affects my creditor's control. Now, when I come into my creditor's control, there are several other ways in which one could have done this. But one of the things that is very key is, if an amount is understated, you record it with the same sign. If an amount is understated, we're going to try it and then we see if it works. If an amount is understated, you record it with the same sign. And then we're going to go and see what happens when an amount is overstated. Now, if an amount is understated, it means whether you're adding it or subtracted it, you did it less. So for you to get to the right amount, you need to do what you did again. Same sign. We good. So if we subtracted an amount, we need to go and subtract again another 3.6. So we come here and say minus 3.6. We understand it comes to the creditors control because of the keyword total, and we know this is a total from a journal. So we come and we say 3.6 in the control. And then it was understated. And I know once an amount is understated, we recorded less. So we need to go and record more of the very same sign. More of the very same sign. So I come and say minus 3.6. CAJ is a minus. So minus 3.6. In the list, there's not going to be any effect there. Okay. Or someone is saying, why no effect in the list? Because if I can ask you, the 3.6, are you going to record it in Puto? Did you hear any name Puto here? Or Planet or Mish or Ariel? No. So we're not going to record it in the list. The error was because we understated the total from the CAJ. Number 2. We good? Is this pace okay? Okay, I'll maintain it this way then. Number 2 reads, a payment of 14,250. A payment. So in my mind, I'm thinking what? EFT. Okay, so if it's a payment, that's a minus. If it's a payment, that's a minus. A payment of 14,250 made to Puto sellers was in error. So it was 14,250, but it was posted as 15,240. It was posted as 15,240 in the creditors ledger. So here, if you look at it, it is 14,250, but we posted more, over. So in this case, they might not have recorded it as over, but you know that it was supposed to be 14,250, but we recorded 15,240. So we recorded over. So this one was overstated. All right. So what do we say? We say my amounts. How much? Let's get the calculator. We would then say my 15,240 minus 14,250. And that will give me 990. So it was overstated by 990. It was overstated by 990. Okay. So where was this? Posted as to the creditor's ledger. Posting to the general ledger was correct. In the general ledger, that is where we find our creditors control. So the general ledger was correct. In other words, the creditors control is nah. So where do we go and correct? We go and correct it where? In the creditors list. Now, if we go onto the list, we're now saying in the list, if a payment, which is a minus, was overstated. Once an amount is overstated, you have to know that we went and we subtracted more. So to correct it, you go and you have to go and add. So we come here, then we say plus 990. The other way to say it is, if an amount is overstated, you correct it by putting the opposite sign. You correct it by putting the opposite sign. The sign that we had here was a minus 14,250, a minus. And then we overstated that minus. So to correct that overstated minus, you're going to go and put the opposite sign, which is a plus. So it becomes plus 990. The difference, then you take the opposite side because it was overstated. You remember what we did with understated? Understated, the difference, same sign. Understated, difference, same sign. Overstated, difference, opposite side. So what we did here, we got the difference, and then we recorded it with the opposite sign. Okay, let's go on to the next one. It reads, an invoice. I know my invoice is a plus. An invoice received from Planet Suppliers 9540 and recorded in the CJ was posted in error to the account of put or sellers in the creditor's ledger. Okay, so we can see here there's no total, so that means there is no error here in the control. Now, an amount which is a plus, which has to do with goods we bought from Planet, and Planet is in the list, was posted to Puto. So I would come to my list and I would say, let's go, because we bought the goods from Planet, let's go to Puto and take it out. We posted it to Puto. It was not supposed to go to Puto. It was supposed to go to Planet. So let's go and take it out of Puto. So if we added incorrectly, we go and we say minus 9540. And then we must take the same amount, and then we now add it to Planet. And Planet is still in the list, plus 9540. And if I do this on my calculator, minus 9540, it has to be minus 9540. Then I say plus 9540. The answer would be 0. So here you would find that you will get a 0 here. The reason why you get a 0 is because both these guys are within the list. So you subtracted the incorrect amount that we had recorded to Puto, and you take it to the right place, which is Planet, and they're both in the list. So it's not going to have an effect on the total. You're just taking it from one of the creditors and you're giving it to one of the creditors. The effect remains 0. Hence, you find a 0 over here. No error with the totals, no errors with casting in the journal, so it won't affect your control. Number 4. Goods returned to Mish dealers, 7.5. So goods returned, what sign is that? That's a minus. Goods returned to Mish dealers for 7.5 and recorded in the CAJ was posted to their account in the creditors ledger as an invoice. Okay, so if goods were returned, which is a minus, we recorded it in the ledger as an invoice. That is a plus. So this is a wrong sign now. But let's see so that we know whether we bring it to the control or to the list. Goods returned to Mish. So Mish is in the creditors list and recorded in the CAJ. So this was recorded in the CAJ and posted to the account in the creditors ledger. So the posting was erroneously done to the account in the creditors ledger as an invoice. That means my control is okay. There is no error in my control. The error is in the list because when I was posting it to Mish dealers, I was supposed to go and say minus 7.5, but I went on to say plus 7.5, which was wrong. So if I'm to correct that, I have to come and say minus 7.5 to cancel that particular error. Then I say again minus 7.5 to record the return of goods. So I end up with 7.5, both being subtracted, which at times you'll find someone who say minus 15,000. That would still be very, very correct. Minus 15,000. Either you say minus 7.5, or minus 15,000 over there like that. Okay, let's go on to the next one, which would be number 5. It reads, SEP traders recorded a purchase of 13,280 from aerial suppliers in the CJ after deducting a 10% trade discount. After deducting a trade discount of 20%, rather, after deducting a trade discount of 20%. However, aerial suppliers informed them that the trade discount agreed was only 10%. Several ways in which one could have done this. One way in which you could have done this was to say, I'm going to do it very slowly. The 13,280 is an amount SEB traders recorded a purchase of 13,280. This 13,280 is after deducting a trade discount of 20%. That means there was an amount before deducting, which is 100%. We don't know that amount. And we deducted a trade discount of 20%. We took out a trade discount of 20%. We also don't know that amount. And then the amount that we then recorded, the 13,280, is after taking out the 20%. That means it is the 80%. That becomes the 80% that we know, which is 13,280. Now, what was the amount before this trade discount was even offered? That means we come here on our calculator, we then say, we want 100. We have an 80. And we multiplied by 13,280. And that will give us 16,600. 16,600. Now, what we did was that we took that 16,600. We took the 16,600 and we gave discount of 20%. And we calculated discount of 20%. So it's 16.6 and we calculated discount of 20%, which would be 3,320. 3,320. And we know that that discount was subtracted. Okay, 3,320. But now we realize that the amount that was deducted, subtracted, which is 3,320, is not the right amount. It should have been 10% that was subtracted. So we subtracted 3,320. But how much was supposed to be subtracted anyway? So we take again the 16,600, the amount before any discount. Then we get our 10%. And then we come here, then we say 16,600 by 10%. That's 1,660. 1,660. This is the discount that we were supposed to have subtracted. So, if we have recorded an amount which is a minus, we subtracted 3,320, yet it was supposed to be 1,660. So the easiest way is to get the difference between these two amounts and then add back that amount. It goes back to the same thing that I said earlier on, that here we can see that the amount was overstated. Once it is overstated, you get the difference between 3,320 and 1,660. And when you get that difference, you record it with the opposite sign. And the sign that we had here was a minus. So the opposite sign would therefore be a plus. That's what you do. So I'll therefore come and say my 3,320 minus 1,660. That gives me 1,660. And that 1,660, what am I going to do? Because the sign that we had used initially was a minus, and we overstated. And I told you, once it's overstated, you get the difference, and then you record it with the opposite sign. So it means I come here. Where do I go? This was done. Remember, this is done from the original entry. So if it's done from the original entry, it affects both our control and our list, because this is done from the original entry. So that means my control needs to be corrected. So I'll come here and I'll say plus 1660. And I go to my list as well and I say plus 1660. Because the error was done from the original entry. Therefore, both my control and my list would be in error in this case. Okay, that was the last one in this activity, and therefore this is the last part, and therefore you are going to add from the 175, you add everything, you get 174,000, and you add all the way going down, you get 174,000, and therefore our books have balanced. Okay, this is what we've done so far. Remember, we were doing the creditors control and the creditors list, because in the previous week we did the creditors ledger, the creditors list against the creditors statement. So we can say that we've covered all the different types of reconciliations that pertains to creditors. What does that mean? It means now we go to our debtors. Let's go to our debtors. Okay, cool. Okay, so before we do our debtors, we're going to quickly take a 5-minute break, and then after the 5-minute break, we do our debtors reconciliation. See you in 5 minutes time. Hello there, welcome back from the short break. Before the break, we did a creditors reconciliation question, which was the creditors list versus the creditors control, because in the previous week we did the creditors list versus the creditors statement. So here we're going to jump now to debtors reconciliation. Okay, so to kick things off with, we're going to do a debtors reconciliation question, and the question says zigzag traders. Okay, so it says zigzag traders sells ladies clothing on credit. Debtors are allowed a credit term of 30 days to settle their accounts. Provide 2 documents that zigzag traders will need from potential debtors before they'll be allowed to open accounts. Obviously, I think this is a question that we can answer much more quicker, okay, of the documents that are required for before we can allow our debtors to open accounts. Okay, so what are we talking about? Number one, we can talk about your identity document. We can talk about your proof of income, your proof of residence as well, your bank statement, and maybe your credit history, such as your references. That is one of the things that can be required before we can open account for potential debtors. And then 1.2 says refer to information A and B. Use the table provided in the answer book to calculate the following: the correct closing balance for the debtors control account on 30 September 2021 indicate with a plus for an increase and a minus for a decrease. So it's a similar structure as what we just did earlier on. And then a decrease or a 0 for no change. Very key that when there is no change, you need to indicate with a 0. So leaving it blank means you will not be rewarded at times. And then the correct amounts owed by the following debtors only. So we're Barnes, Davis, and E. Foley. And these are the amounts. So if you look at these amounts, and then you see that this is the debtors control balance of 228,000. So it's going to be almost the same procedure as what we did with the creditors. Once you see an invoice, you think plus and you think DJ. And once you see a receipt, that means our debtors have paid. You think minus and you think CRJ. And once you see discount, you think minus and you think again CRJ. And once you think interest that we're charging to our debtors, you think plus and you think GJ. And then others will come as we go. But also, lastly, maybe when you think of returns, so you think credit note, minus, and you think DAJ. So individual accounts, we will now post to the debtors list, and then, so again, remember, individual accounts here. And then here we're dealing with totals. Here we're dealing with totals over there. Cool. Let's go and see. Here are the errors and omissions that must be taken into account. Errors and omissions that must be taken into account. And they get on up to number 7. Let's start with number 1. It says an invoice for 1,750. So once I hear the word invoice, what comes to my mind? I think plus. An invoice means plus. Okay, for 1,750 issued to Barnes was not reflected in the books of zigzag traders. Once again, we need to establish who we are and who they are. So zigzag traders and Barnes. So an invoice for 1,750 issued to Barnes is a debtor, was not recorded by us. So in our books, in other words. So if that amount is not recorded in our books, it therefore means it is nowhere. If it is nowhere, it means you need to record it in both the control as well as the list. So it's an invoice, a plus amount that has not been recorded. So I come in and I say plus what? 1,750 plus 17. There is a 1 there, Simbi, plus 1,750. And I come to who? Mr. Barnes. And I say on Mr. Barnes, plus 1,750. So I'm adding 1750 all the way through. I add 1750 in the debtor's control. I add 1750 as well as to a balance because it's an invoice, which is a plus that was not recorded. Can I go to the next one? Are you ready? Let's go. Let's do that together. Number 2. A direct deposit, that means a debtor is paid, minus. The sign for a direct deposit is a minus. A direct deposit of 2.5 by e-folly was correctly recorded in the journal. So, but incorrectly posted to the account of e-fogs, another debtor in the debtor's ledger. So it simply means if it's recorded correctly in the journal, that means my control is okay. So that means I come to my control, effect is 0. But remember, this is a payment by e-folly. We should have gone and said minus to e-folly, but instead we went and we said minus to e-fogs. So we must now go and say minus to e-folly. So we go to e-folly, then we say minus 2,500 to e-folly. Minus 2,500 to e-folly. We good? Let's continue. Number 3. Yes, we are number 3 already. We're number 3. It says, the total, once I hear the word total, it is trying to tell me something already. Once I hear the word total, the total of the debtor's journal, the DJ. So DJ tells me invoices, that's a plus. The total of the DJ 62.5 was incorrectly recorded as 65.2. So what are we dealing with here? Overstated amount in the debtor's control account. They go on to tell us that is in the debtor's control account, but we knew it was in the debtor's control account because we're dealing with the total here of the DJ. So the total of the DJ, which is 62.5, was overstated and we recorded it as 65.2. Again, let's get the difference. What are we looking at? It is 65.2 minus 62.5. The difference is 2,700. So let's come here and we say the difference is 2,700. Okay. Now, once an amount is overstated, that means you recorded more. So to correct it, you record the difference but with the opposite sign. So remember, it's in the DJ, that amount would have been a plus because in the DJ, we record invoices and invoices are added, plus. So we have a plus amount which was overstated. Therefore, the correct way is to get the difference and you record it with the opposite sign. So you come here and you then say minus 2.7, minus 2.7 over here like that. An effect in the list? No, certainly not. Can I go? Yeah, we can go. Let's go. Number 4 reads, merchandise sold to C devs, 3.5. So if merchandise is sold, this is a plus. That's an invoice. Merchandise sold to C devs, that's a plus, 3.5. Was treated as a return. A return is a minus and recorded in the DAJ. Ooh. So you can see here now that this error is done everywhere because it was treated as a return and recorded in the DAJ. So once it is recorded in the DAJ like that, that means the total of the DAJ is in error as well as the posting from the DAJ, which is going to the debtors list. So here we have to correct everywhere. But how do we do this? Remember, it is merchandise sold, which should have been a plus 3.5, but we recorded it as a minus 3.5. So the correct way is to go and say plus 3.5, but twice. So we're coming to C Davis and we're saying to C Davis, we subtracted 3.5 that we should have added. So we come, then we say plus 3.5. Then we come again, then we say another plus 3.5 again. All right. And then we then come and we do the same in the control. So we're coming to say plus 7,000. Plus 7,000. That is how we would do it. That is how it would be done. Can I go on? Let's go on to the next one. Let's do the next one. The next one then reads, which is now number 5. Number 5. 5,200 received. So let's continue. From Declan, a debtor whose outstanding balance was written off 6 months ago. If a person's account is written off, it means it has been taken off out of the business books, the debtor's books. That particular amount is no longer reflecting there. So that debtor has been written off, is no longer part of our debtors. When that particular debtor comes and he pays that amount, the error that was done here, it is that amount was recorded in the CRJ as a debtor. That should not have been. That should have been recorded only as bad debts recovered, not under the debtors column. So what we did here, we have understated our debtors because we have recorded an amount as if debtors have paid, yet our debtors did not pay. So we should go and reverse that amount. If an amount is received, that's a minus. So we came here and we said minus 5.2, and yet that was not supposed to be. So to correct that, we come here, then we say plus 5.2. That is how you do that. And then down there is no other entry that will be made in the list. All right, let's go on to number 6. Number 6 then reads, merchandise retained by A bonds. Returns means minus. Merchandise retained by A bonds was recorded in the relevant journal as 250 instead of 700. So if we come here, then we say 700 minus 250. The difference gives you 450. Okay, so here we have our difference, 450. Let's go again. Merchandise returned, that's a minus, by A bonds was recorded in the relevant journal as 250 instead of 700. So what we did here is we understated. We understated the amount. Once you understate the amount, you go and you record the difference with the same sign because it's under. So you keep the same sign. So you're coming here and you're saying merchandise retained by A bonds was recorded in the relevant journal as 250. So that means the control is also in error. So you come in, then you have to say minus 450 and post it accordingly to A bonds account. So you come to A bonds, then you have to say again minus 450 here as well. Minus 450. Why? Because when an amount is understated, you record the difference with the same sign. And then the last one. In EFT for 7850, EFT means minus, received from eFolly as part payment of his account was entered correctly in the relevant journal, but no entries were made in the debtor's ledger. So it simply means it's an EFT, a minus amount, 7850, which we received from Folly, was entered in the relevant journal. Relevant journal simply means the CRJ. And that therefore means our control is fine. But no entries were made in the ledger. We're talking now of eFolly's account. So we should come to eFolly and we subtract 7850 like that. And then that concludes this particular question. Okay, I'm going to quickly come now to the debtor's age analysis as promised. This would be the last part of today's lesson. In the debtor's age analysis, we are going to be looking at several other things, but it is important that you understand what is this debtor's age analysis. It is a tool used to manage outstanding debts and identify debtors who do not comply with the credit agreement. It displays a breakdown of debtors' accounts balances for each specified period for selected debtors' accounts or range of selected debtors' accounts. The debtor's age analysis is useful for credit control, helps a business to anticipate any future cash flow problems. Okay, let's go, and we also have what is known as a debtor's clerk, or the credit controller, responsible for monitoring debtors' credit rating before we extend credit to them, and they monitor debtors' accounts to avoid the debtors exceeding their credit limit. So the credit limit, we're simply talking about the maximum that we allow a debtor to buy goods from us. That's the credit limit. Ensuring that payments are paid as per agreement. So we're talking about credit terms now. It is the amount of days that we give our debtors to settle their accounts. And then approve credit sales before any order is delivered to a customer. Okay, so if we are to analyze, these are the areas that we look at. Number one, we look at slow payers. You can find that we have a debtor that pays in March, jumps April, then pays in May, jumps May, jumps June, pays in July. That's a slow payer. Or we look at debtors that are exceeding credit limits. Remember, credit limits, the maximum in terms of rents that we allow them to buy. And then we look at debtors that we continue selling even when they're defaulting. And then we also look at internal control measures or actions that must be taken against problematic debtors. We need to calculate percentages of outstanding debtors. I've seen questions where these are demanded. And we also need to identify figures and quote names of debtors when we respond to exam questions. Okay, let's do activity number one. This is from our very own province, Gauteng, Prelim 2022. And then we look at question 1.2. Okay, let's look at the information. Debtors are usually allowed to settle their accounts within 30 days. Okay, these are our credit terms. And then this is the information that we're provided of our debtors. So we have Esther Wood, we have G. Kramer, J. Boozer, and B. Kempfer. And then we look at the information and then we're going to analyze it. But first, let's answer this question. How does the preparation of a debtor's age analysis assist the business in controlling its debtors? Number one, to identify debtors who do not comply with credit terms and then assist the business to avoid selling to defaulting debtors. That is number one. Number two, the business can identify debtors who are slow payers. And then next, it can identify debtors against whom legal action needs to be taken to identify debtors who can be handed over to debt collectors. And then it can assist in ensuring debts are collected timeously as well. Okay, and then the rest will also be relevant. Let's quickly come to the next question. Now, so here we want to identify problematic debtors or problems that we can see here. Remember the question that we had where we had to identify two problems that is shown in the debtor's age analysis, and then we quote evidence as figures for these particular problems, and that is what we are going to do right now. Okay, so let's begin. Problem number one, we want to see or want to look at debtors that are exceeding credit limits. Debtors that are exceeding credit limits. Debtors that are exceeding credit limits. Let's start with the first one. Which debtor do we see that is exceeding their credit limit over here? Let's look at the first one, Esther Wood. Esther Wood is supposed to buy only for 4,000 from us, but presently is owing 6,800. So it come in, then we say Esther Wood is exceeded by how much? Esther Wood is exceeded by 2,800. 2,800. Esther Wood has exceeded by 2,800. I got the difference between the two amounts, and that is 2,800. And if I want to know that as a percentage, I'll then say the 2,800. I divide that by my 4,000. I multiply by 100 over 1. I'll come here and then I'll say 2,800 divided by 4,000. I multiply by 100. That will give me 70%. That means 70% of his debt is because it has exceeded, all right, the credit limit. 70% of what he owes us has exceeded his credit limit, or he's exceeded his credit limit rather by 70%. He's exceeded his credit limit by 70%. Okay, let's go on to the next one. Whom else do we see is a problem? B. Kempfer. Okay, so we come here. It is B. Kempfer. And with B. Kempfer, what do we see? We see that B. Kempfer's credit limit is 5,000, but here it's 5.5. So he's exceeded his credit limit by 500 rands. All right. And if you calculate that as a percentage, so I simply say 500 over 5,000, you multiply by 100 over 1. So they've exceeded by 10% here. They've exceeded by 10%. What do we do? Internal control measures to correct this problem. We must stop selling to debtors so that they do not exceed their credit limit. Okay, so do not sell to debtors. Do not sell to debtors. Do not sell to debtors who exceed their limit. Who exceed their limit. Do not sell to debtors who would have exceeded their limit. The next point is we need to ensure that debtors have credit before we sell goods to them. Ensure debtors have credit. They have available credit. Ensure that debtors have credit before selling. Okay, so we need to ensure that they have available credit before we can sell goods to them. Let's go to problem number 2 that we can see here. So we looked at credit limit first, and then now secondly, let's look at our credit terms. Let's look at our credit terms. Our credit terms are 30 days. So we want to see debtors that are not complying to the credit terms of 30 days. As you can see here, here is number 1. That is Esther Wood. So Esther Wood here has exceeded the credit terms of 30 days. 1,200 here, that 1,200. Okay, let's say here with is exceeded with 1,200. So this is exceeded the 30 days by what? Because it's in the 60 days, by 30 days. Okay, so he's exceeded the credit terms by 30 days. 1.2 has exceeded the credit terms by 30 days. Let's look at another one again. The next one would be your B Kempfer here. As you can see, here's this one and that one. If we add those two, they give us 4,500. So we come here, then we say B Kempfer. And B Kempfer is exceeded, all right, by how much? Is exceeded with 4,500. And you can see that 4,500 is exceeded by what? Because this is for 90 days and this is for 60 days already. Okay, so we can already talk about 60 days here. Is exceeded by 60 days. All right, and then what do we do? Internal control measures. So first, we talk about send regular reminders. We can send regular reminders. We can send regular reminders, and then next we can charge interest. We can charge interest for debtors that are paying late, and then we can also offer them early settlement discount. Offer early settlement discount. We can offer them early settlement discount as well. So that becomes our error number, our problem number 2. Let's go on now to the other part, which says the owner Rector is not happy with the control of debtors. Provide a calculation to justify his concern. Okay, so if you check here, we have this 1.2, the 2.1, and the 2.4. These have exceeded their credit terms of 30 days. So if we add these three amounts, that will be 1.2 plus 2.1 plus 2.4. They'll give me a total of 5.7. So that means I have 5,700, which has exceeded the credit terms of 30 days. And the total amount is 19,800. So that will be over 19.8 here. And if I multiply by 100 over 1, I'll then say divide by 19.8, like that. And then I multiply by 100. And that's going to give me 28.8%. That simply means 28.8%. 28.8% of these debtors are not complying to the credit terms. They are not complying. They are not complying to the 30 days credit terms. This is why you will be concerned. In other words, we only have 70, if you say 100 minus 28.8, we only have 71.2% of debtors complying to the credit terms. That should be a concern for him. Let's go to activity number 2. Activity number 2. Here's activity number 2 from the NSC November 2021. And it says Zigzag Traders sells ladies clothing on credit. Debtors are allowed credit terms of 30 days. All right. And then to settle their accounts, provide 2 documents that Zigzag Traders will need from potential debtors before they can be allowed to open accounts. I think we have passed this road earlier on, if you remember. Explain 3 different problems highlighted by the debtor's age analysis. 3 different problems. Provide the name of the debtor and or figures in each case. This is very key. You need to provide the name of a debtor and the figures in each case. Okay, let's go. So here is the debtor's age analysis. Documents that can be required. Number 1, your identity document. Number 2, the salary advice or the proof of income. Number 3, proof of residence. All right. Number 3, references such as your credit history. All right. And then your bank statements. Normally they ask for 3 months. And then lastly, your criminal record, that is police clearance. And then explain 3 different problems highlighted by the debtor's age analysis. Provide the name of the debtor and the figures. Okay, let's begin now with problem number 1. All right, if we have any problems here, let's look at problem number 1 that we can find. Okay, so remember what we are looking at. It makes it very easy, therefore. Problem number 1. And they said we must provide names for that. So we have debtors that are not complying to credit terms. Not complying to credit terms. What are the credit terms? 30 days. All right. So whom do we see that is not complying to credit terms? These are what we call slow payers now. These are our slow payers. Let's start with number 1, A. Whom do we see? J. Bloom. We see we have J. Bloom here. J. Bloom. He's owing 20,000, which is more than 30 days, more by 30 days. It is more by 30 days. Let's go to the next one. Next one that we see Omach here. Omach is owing 4,000, and that 4,000 is more by It is more by how many days? 60 days. It is more by 60 days. All right. And then if you are able, you can go again another point. You can see that all that is on this side is not complying. So 21% plus 7%. So you can see that 28% of debtors, 28% of our debtors do not comply with terms. Debtors do not comply with terms. They do not comply with the terms. Okay, let's go on to problem number 2. We want to see if we have any debtors that have exceeded their limits. Do we have any debtors that have exceeded their credit limits? Let's see. With J Bloom, the credit limit is 52, is owing 45, is okay. ZP 22, and the balance is 29. So here we have A, ZP. So ZP has exceeded. ZP has exceeded the credit limit by, you get the difference between 22 and 29 is exceeded by 7,000. Is exceeded the credit limit by 7,000. There we go. Do we have another one? 1612, we're okay. 66, we're okay. And then let's go to the next one. Problem number 3. Problem number 3. All right. So we want to see if we have any debtors that we continue to sell to, yet they are not complying. All right. So we want to see if we have a poor control over debtors. We want to see if we have poor control over debtors. We're talking about a situation where we continue to allow our debtors to buy on credit even though they are not complying. All right. So in other words, we're looking at debtors that we continue to allow to purchase when they are defaulting. Let's look at the first one here. How much over there? All right. So you can see that how much, that's my first point, how much was allowed to purchase goods of 2,000. All right. His current purchase is a current purchase. How much is a current purchase of 2,000? How much is a current purchase of 2,000? Whilst 4,000, whilst this 4,000 here, whilst that 4,000 is overdue, by 90 days. Whilst the 4,000 is overdue by 90 days. So it shows that we do not have proper control over our debtors in that case. And then if we're to look at another one, let's look at another one. Let's look at J Bloom. Let's look at J Bloom. What is the problem with J Bloom? So if you see J Bloom has a current purchase of 18,000, whilst he has that 20,000 that is owing for 60 days. So the next one is J Bloom. J Bloom has a current purchase of 18,000, whilst 20,000, whilst 20,000 is 30 days overdue. 30 days overdue. Okay. So this was the third problem that we could find. Okay, let's go on to the next part. It says provide 2 points to support the internal auditor's concern that Susan's job description could lead to potential fraud. Okay, so here was the scenario. Susan, a member of the sales staff, is also responsible for collecting cash from customers who purchase and pay in this way. Susan also receives goods returned and issues credit notes to customers who return goods. So the internal auditor is not happy because the internal auditor thinks that this could lead to fraud. It has the potential for fraud. So here are the answers. Number one, why should the auditor be concerned? Number one, there's too many related functions performed by one person. This would compromise on efficiency, and then we end up with a job not being well done. There's lack of supervision, and this could lead to negligence. Lack of supervision could lead to negligence. And if there's no supervision, we can end up with rolling over of cash. And then there can be theft as well. And no authorization of returns is also an issue. That could lead to not applying the returns policy effectively. There's no continuity of tasks, and then tasks may not get done, and there can be a lag if Susan is absent. And cash can easily be stolen because it may not be banked daily, so we would rather use electronic payments or pay using credit cards. Okay, so we're going to come to the last activity for the day, which is activity 3, and it reads: Grassy traders, you are provided with information concerning internal control over the debtors of grassy traders, and then study the given account of Tandimoy. So here we have one debtor. In the previous ones, we had more debtors, but here we have only one debtor, which is Tandimoy. And we're going to study the information of Tandimoy in the debtors ledger of grassy traders. Identify 3 internal control problems relating to the management of the account of debtor Tandimoy and court figures. And here is the information. Let's go to problem number 1. Problem number 1. Where do we look? Let's look at credit terms. Let's look at credit terms. All right. So we know that our credit terms, all right, were given. And then here, let's see, 5% of 5% discount is paid within 30 days of the statement date. And then debts must be fully paid within 60 days of the statement date. Interest is charged at 2% per month on the balances 90 days overdue. All right. So if we're looking at credit terms, we want to see amounts that are owing for more than 60 days. All right. So which amounts are those ones that are owing for more than 60 days? We are in the month of February and 28 February. All right. So we are looking into amounts that would have transpired in the month of November. So, and December as well. So if we come here and we'll then see that we have amounts that are not complying to credit terms. Which one is that? Here, an invoice 473, 16,680. That amount has not yet been settled. That amount has not yet been settled. So we then say the 16,680 dated 10 November has not complied to the credit terms, of 60 days, as that amount is owing now for what? This is Feb, January, December, that is in November, so that is owing for more than 90 days. For more than 90 days. That is owing for more than 90 days. Let's go on to the next one. Do we have, let's look at the second one. The second one. If we look at the second one, you will see that that amount that we spoke about, the 16,680, we are told here that once it is owing for more than 90 days or balance is 90 days overdue, we must charge 2% interest. But if we come here, we look all over, we don't see any interest here. So we see that no interest, has been charged. No interest has been charged on amounts that are 90 days overdue. There is no interest that has been charged on such amounts. Okay. And then problem number 3. You see that we continue to sell goods here in the month of February, yet we have amounts that are owing from November in the previous year. So another problem is we continue to sell, continued to extend credit, continue to extend credit when the debtor is defaulting. We continue to extend credit when the debtor is defaulting. We continued to extend credit even though the debtor is defaulting. The account should have been suspended. The account should have been suspended before. The account should have been suspended before invoice 576. Okay, and that should be suspended until payment is received. Until payment is received. And we did not do that. Okay, so that becomes our problem number 3. Well, my good friends, we've come to the end of today's lesson. I hope you have benefited from the lesson that we've had today. I hope to see you next week, and we are writing next week Friday, so we will meet on the Thursday. I hope to see you on Thursday as we prepare for paper 1. Tell your friends to tell their friends that Mr. Simbi will be doing the final preliminary revision at exactly 2:30. I'll be here, so I expect to see you. Until next time, enjoy your studies and goodbye.